There's a page here on the Netgear ReadyNAS site, and their forums are great. There's a really great community around this. And there's a post here about setting up the Sparc platform development environment using QEMU. But the documentation is kind of really outdated, and none of the instructions on here, none of it I could piece together to actually get a working environment. So I had to figure it out myself by using information from the four corners of the universe, and I'm going to try to collate all that here so that anyone who watches this video can go from kind of zero to having the development environment up and running pretty quickly. So one thing that is correct is that you do need to download the ReadyNAS compile environment, and it's in this compressed format, gzip format. And so we're going to take a look at how to deal with that. So in order to gunzip it, you have to have a decompressor installed that will understand GZ files. My recommendation is that if you're interested in developing in the ReadyNAS development environment in QEMU, you might as well install Cygwin. So if you go to cygwin.com, if you don't have Cygwin installed already, and you scroll down, there's a link here to setup.exe. So I'm just going to click on, and I'm going to save. And I'm going to double click on that. Click next, say install from internet. I just choose the defaults for these things personally. By default, Cygwin will select a base kind of install, and that base install should include gzip. So if we type gzip into the search box here and look under here, we can see that it's going to keep the current version. If I could select reinstall or something, or an older version, but I'm just going to keep what I have. Another thing I highly suggest is minTTY, which is under base now, but make sure that that's getting installed by making sure that this either says keep, you already have it, or install. And as well, wget is pretty handy, and that's going to be under web, and I already have it installed, so it says keep, but if yours doesn't say keep, you will want to click on it until it says install. One thing that I forgot to mention when I was recording the screen cam is that we're going to be using SSH to get into the virtual machine that we're going to start. So in the same search box that I typed in the other package names into, you want to type in OpenSSH, OPEN-SSH, and then make sure that you install that, and because we're going to be using the SSH command line later on in the video. So make sure that you set that for install before you proceed with the rest of the video. So once we're all done with that, we click next. And even if you have Cygwin installed already, this is the way that it also will kind of update packages. So I'm going to make sure that my Cygwin is closed while it's updating. And while that's going, we're going to need to get QEMU, because this QCOW is a QEMU kind of self-contained virtual machine image. So there's this really cool site that these guys have, lesage.free.fr/QEMU. We want to get the latest version, so QEMU 1.0.1, and these guys compile QEMU for Win32 using MinGW. So we can click on that, boop, and hit save. So let's take a look at the Cygwin. So the Cygwin finished downloading, and it's running the install process, the post-install process for some of these things. That's done. I don't like the icons on my desktop, so I'm going to click finish. So Cygwin has been fully updated, and there's a couple ways to look at this. You can go into Start and under Programs, and then go under Cygwin, and then choose Cygwin Bash Terminal or Cygwin Terminal. What I prefer to do in modern Windows is to just type minTTY, and then we can run that. I already have it pinned in my taskbar here, so I'm going to load that up. And I have my Cygwin and my min-titty set up. If I type gunzip, I have that. If I type wget, I have that also. Let's go back to our browser. We can do this wget for the ReadyNAS compile environment and execute that, which I have already done. Sorry, ls ready star blah blah blah. By default, Cygwin puts you into its own kind of user directory. I like to do everything in the place Windows expects, or the place Windows will look when we use a Windows Explorer, so we can get around and do things easily. So I'm going to, so in our browser, I'm going to highlight this command and press Control-C to copy. In min-titty, since if the shell Control-C means something, it means to break out of a program, their paste is not Control-V, and the copy is not Control-C, it's Shift-Insert. Or you can right-click and say copy and paste like that. So anyway, so that's the wget command line. Hit Enter. The -Q is for quiet, that's why we're not seeing any output. I think that kind of sucks. So I'm going to do it with output because I think it's useful. So we see here what the progress is, the percentage it's going. We would just type gunzip. Well, actually, if we go back to the web page, you can just copy it if you want. We would just copy that, Control-C, and then Shift-Insert to paste it, like that. And this is going to give me an error because I stopped the download, unexpected into file. But if this succeeded, I would see no output. But what I would see, I'm going to type ls to show me a directory listing. What I would see is I would see that ReadyNAS compile environment.qcow, but just bigger because it's been uncompressed. So so we've done that. So now that we have that environment here, so then it just gives QEMU System Sparc HDA that no graphic. Under Windows, it's a little different. And so that's the reason for this video. So we also downloaded our QEMU 1.0.1-Windows. So I'm going to double click on that. And it's just a zip file. So, so I can just double click on it. So I'm going to Control-C here, the QEMU-Windows-1.0.1. And I am going to stick it, let's say, in downloads for the sake of argument. Right, so then on here, I would just hit Control-V. Okay, cool. So going back to our Spark platform development environment thing. You can do this in Cygwin, so we can cd into downloads. I'm already in C users mat, which is where Windows thinks my home directory is. I can just cd into downloads. I can cd into QEMU-Windows-1.0.1. If I do an ls in here, I see the QEMU-System-Sparc, which is suspiciously similar to this command line. But if we just try to use this command line, it won't work under Windows, and there's a number of reasons for that. This is based on an old QEMU, 0.13 or 0.14 or something like that. QEMU is now on version 1.0. So the command line is a little bit different, but also under Windows, things are a little bit different. I have a text file here that has this command line in it. So I'm just going to copy this. And I'm going to paste it in here, and we're going to go over it step by step. So we're going to run QEMU System Sparc.exe. -L tells it where BIOS images are, and those awesome French guys who run that site package all the open BIOSes that we need, including the Spark one that we'll need to launch into kind of Spark mode here. And then the next step is to point it at that ReadyNAS compile environment. So the one I already have is just in downloads, which is in just one directory down from where we are. And then networking is interesting and complicated. So, and this was by far what took me the longest amount of time. When we're doing development in that virtual machine, we really need network access. we need to be able to install packages using apt, and we need to be able to easily download source packages, source tarballs and stuff like that. So networking is where I got stuck for a while. So I'm going to get into that in 1 second. And then by default, the QEMU Sparc emulator emulates a Super Sparc 5. And by default, it populates the virtual machine that has 128 megabytes of memory. And that actually works fine for compiling Samba and other stuff that you might want to recompile in your ReadyNAS. I found that there were some programs that required more. So the -M space 256 tells QEMU that our virtual machine that we're going to be running should be virtually have 256 megs of RAM. So now there's this networking piece here. So we need to say -netNIC. So we need to say, hey, emulate a network interface card, emulate the hardware. And then we need to say how we're going to do that. So I finally found a website on talking about the OLPC, the One Laptop Per Child project, and emulating it in QEMU. And it was there that I found instructions, step-by-step instructions on how to get this to work under Windows. It says Windows XP here, but I'm running Windows 7 64-bit. And it works great. So we're going to go to openvpn.net, just like it says here. And then we go and we download OpenVPN for our PC. And we click Save. And we run the installer. And we click Next until it finishes. I'm going to take you through part of it, just so you guys can see, but I'm going to cancel out before the end. Or is that it? I think that's it. Doesn't ask me anything, it just does it. Great. So that's cool. So going back to our instruction thing. So hitting back to go back to that OLPC wiki page, wiki.laptop.org, blah, blah, blah. So did that. So open network connections and find the network adapter of type tap-win32. It actually has a different name in the newer versions of OpenVPN, but it's easy to see anyway. So network connections. Great. So view network connections. And you can see here, it does say tap-win32. So that's what it says. It says tap-win32. And what they tell you is to rename it. It is by default named something like local area connection and then a number. And rename it to tap. I renamed it to my-tap just so I wouldn't get it confused here with this. This tap is not the name. This is the name. So I call it my-tap just so I wouldn't get confused. And the way you rename it is you click on it and you press F2, and you can change the name to, whatever. But I chose my tap. Select the real LAN and the tap you just renamed. Right-click and select Create Bridge. So we do that by I click on my tap, and then I Control-click on LAN local area connection, which is the thing where my internet is coming in. On yours, it could be a wireless connection. That's possible. But you right-click. And here, mine says remove from bridge. Yours would say create bridge. And then once you do that, and you will need your admin password, you get a network bridge. So it's a virtual device in Windows. So then, let's see. Actually, you know what? Let me just go through this with you guys. So I'm going to remove it so that I'm back to where I would be, right? Okay, so now it's like, oh, that network bridge is unplugged. So following the directions from that wiki, I click on this, I Control-click on that, I right-click, I say Add to Bridge, ask me for the password every time. Cool, so that worked. Okay, and then that's kind of it. So this wiki also gives a hint about what the command line should be. So going back to here, so we say -netnick to say to tell the emulator to emulate a network interface card, and then we say use tap, which is a tunneling thing, and then we say with the interface name my-tap. That my-tap should be the same name as here, that we've named it here, right? So that's one of the reasons to rename it from local space area space connection 4 is just to get rid of the spaces. You can call it whatever you want. Right, so just to go over this one more time, this runs Qemu. This tells it the directory in which it can find the BIOSes, and it's automatically going to try to load the Sparc one. This is the virtual machine image for the ReadyNAS compile environment that we downloaded from the ReadyNAS site. This tells it to emulate a network card. This tells it to use a tunnel bridge with that interface name. And then this tells the virtual machine to emulate 256 megabytes of RAM instead of the default 128 bytes of RAM. I'm sorry, 128 megabytes of RAM, not bytes. So one of the things here is that when you get something wrong, it doesn't tell you anything. And I think that when those guys compile QEMU using MinGW, I don't think that they redirect standard in and standard out correctly. So you'll read a lot of forum posts about people who tried newer QEMUs and it just doesn't appear to work, and that's what they're talking about. Under Linux, this would say, hey, you got some piece of this wrong. And what I got wrong is that under Cygwin, which is using Unix paths, / is not what we want to use. / is what we want to use. I think that's what the problem is. That is what the problem is. It's booting up the virtual machine. It has one CPU of a certain kind. At the boot, you can have it time out, or you can just hit enter. It's going to uncompress the image, and it's going to boot. Hooray. Let's go back and look at our web browser and go back to the Netgear page. So we had to modify this command line for Windows a great deal. The -no graphic will not work under Windows, unfortunately. So copying and pasting between the windows can be a little bit of a pain. And they say here the default root password in that virtual machine is just the letter A. So we'll take a look at that in a second. And this is kind of what it looks like, just like they say here. So then there's a whole bunch of stuff here about people having problems and things like that. I'm going to skip over that because some of these things go back 3-4 years and aren't super relevant. Yeah. So when it says starting cron D done, that's when the system is actually ready for your input. Now, SSH is not running this virtual machine by default. And just as an aside, by the way, if we go back to our network connections, before we saw a red X on my tap because it had no connection. Now it does. That's because the virtual machine is kind of virtually hooked up to this tunnel bridge interface here. So that's one of the ways that we know that it's working. So once TTY0 stops at starting cron, that's when you can actually interact with the VM as a user. So when I click inside the QEMU window here, it looks like a terminal window. It's not. This is graphical, right? Because it's emulating the kind of VGA BIOS and the kind of pixel by pixel display of the Super Sparc 5. So when I click in here, it grabs my keyboard and mouse so that I could use the keyboard and mouse like I would natively on the real machine. So unlike on Linux, when we boot up at TTY0 on a real machine, this doesn't give us a root command prompt here. We have to press Control-Alt-3, and that takes us to the serial titty. And this is where we can log in. So like the web page said, we type the root password, we type root, and we type A is the root password, and bam, we have a shell, which is really, really cool. There's a lot of everyone knows about virtual machines for x86, but virtual machines for Sparc and being able to emulate a Sparc Linux or Solaris environment is actually really, really cool. One thing though is that as you'll note is that because this is graphical, I can't actually highlight the text here. I can't copy and paste, which is kind of irritating. So what I like to do is start up SSH, which is in the virtual machine by default, I believe. If it's not, you can type apt-get update, and see we have a network connection. In fact, we can look at the details of that in 1 second. The virtual machine is quite slow, but it is much faster than trying to compile stuff on your ReadyNAS itself. So keep that in mind. And the speed of the VM to some degree is determined by the speed of your desktop as well. So I'll talk about how to get a little extra boost out of it in a moment. A word of advice: do not do an apt-get dist-upgrade, which will upgrade all the packages. That will break the VM. They have done stuff to it so that it will compile stuff correctly for the ReadyNAS. Do not update the GCC packages on here. Do not update the libc packages on here. You want to be very, with scalpel-like precision about the packages that you choose to update. So we just want to make sure that is it OpenSSH-server is installed, I think is the package name. And so it says that it is already at the newest version. Awesome. Once we've done that, we can say -etc init.d ssh start. Okay. The first time it'll say could not load host key. I don't know why it says that, but it says it every time. I've already generated a host key. If you run it twice, then it works. All right, at that point, we can go back to our Cygwin terminal. Or not this one, we'll open up a new one. So now we can SSH into the virtual machine. So one question is, well, what's the IP address of the virtual machine from the bridge? And there it is right there, 192.168.0.173. You know, it's using the DHCP server on my local LAN that's run off of another Netgear device, Netgear wireless switch. So we want to SSH to that, 192.168.0.173. And I would say root at 192.168.0.173. Taking a moment. The password is A, just like we logged in on the serial terminal. Great. Now the reason we want to do this is because in MinTitty we can highlight text and we can copy and paste. We can't do that on the serial titty here inside of QEMU. And trust me, typing in long URLs manually is not a happy time. So we have a shell, and the Cygwin MinTitty is using terminal settings such that we get colored highlighting in our stuff and other cool stuff like that. I think I did make some modifications to my bash RC to make that happen. I think, yeah, this stuff here. So you might want to edit your bash RC so you get some of this stuff. And it has Vim and stuff like that, and you can install some of the packages that you need. Just don't upgrade all the packages. Do not do a dist upgrade. Again, don't do a dist upgrade. So yeah, what else was there? You know, I think that's about it. Let me just take a quick look at my little text file of notes here. So that was a command line. And I made a lot of notes here as I was trying to build certain packages. I was trying to build a new GCC, not using the package system, but a kind of a hosted version of GCC. Whoops, sorry about that. A couple of things to note. Building packages with the GCC 3.3, which is what you have to use in order to produce a program that will run on the ReadyNAS. There is a GCC 3.4 that is installed in the virtual machine, but it has not been patched properly. The binaries you produce with that will work in the VM, but not run on the ReadyNAS itself. So keep that in mind. The compiler that they have, both the 3.3 and the 3.4, both have crashes when trying to compile things like Samba 3.6 or trying to bootstrap GCC itself or some supporting libraries and stuff like that. The main way to get away with that is to use C flags of -OS. Note the lack of -G. Putting -G in there for debug symbols actually will induce other crashes. And these are all crashes that have long since been fixed. And in fact, the GCC that is in Debian Etch, which is the next version of Debian after the one that they've chosen here, doesn't have these problems. It would be really nice if they updated their compile environment with those compilers from Debian Etch. It would actually make things a lot easier. But you can work around it by doing -OS. which doesn't turn off all optimizations, but turns off the ones that cause crashes sometimes. And by not supplying -G, that works around, there's just kind of GCC is doing less as a compiler, so there's less chance it's going to trip over something and crash. Right, so we talked about having the VM to have at least 256 megs of memory. So we supplied that command line. And then there was some other notes here. So to get further started with compiling arbitrary packages, this guy who runs flumps.org/ReadyNAS, he compiled a newer Samba and a newer version of OpenSSH, which was awesome. He has some great instructions here that now that you have a working virtual machine, you'll be able to do. So doing an apt-get apt-get update, and just kind of, in fact, what you can do if you want is you can just highlight those, copy that using Control-C, and then paste it here into Mintity. This is our virtual machine SSH session here, right? The Debian Sparc, and you can just paste those commands into here, and let it go about its business. Walk away, get some tea, whatever. And then you can follow these instructions for compiling newer versions of Samba. Note that he has a thing here for compiling Samba 3.3.7. These same instructions will work with 3.5, 3.6 versions of Samba. Keep in mind that there is a new version of the Radiator firmware coming out for ReadyNAS Duo that there's already a beta of that updates the Samba to the latest 3.5 series, and it does solve a lot of the performance issues that I personally had, for instance, with iTunes, hosting my iTunes library on the ReadyNAS. So compiling Samba itself maybe isn't as valuable as it once was, but most of these things like the zlibdev and the libc6 dev, installing make, autoconf, things like that, Flex and Bison, those are all things that you'll need anyway. So this is a great place to just paste that in and get started for when you want to try to compile other stuff. Let me just go through these other tabs. This is the Samba latest Git version, which I was doing some performance experiments with. Right, this is a post about a newer version of OpenSSH, which the Flumps guy has supplied. Again, on flumps.org, you don't need to download his OpenBIOS. You don't need to do that. The one that comes with the QEMU 1.0.1 that we downloaded works fine. So that's all cool. If you want to get his OpenSSH package, it is newer than the one that's even in the latest Radiator 4.1.9 beta, so that could still be valuable. So that's beginning to end. How to get modern QEMU up on a modern Windows system, and get started with your development. I hope this is really helpful. Just to show, I recompiled bin-utils, one of the latest versions, as part of recompiling the latest version of GCC, the one that GCC 4.7, which came out last week, and all of its supporting libraries, as well as Samba 3.6.3. I'm having a lot of success with recompiling stuff and compiling newer versions of stuff and getting it installed. The ReadyNAS does have a mode where you can do a kind of a soft reset where it will kind of reinstall like the base OS, but not reset your configs. So if you screw something minor up on your ReadyNAS, you can use that paperclip in the pinhole trick. Just be sure you don't do the full reset. So I really like my ReadyNAS, and I just wanted to make sure that other people who were inclined to try stuff out would have less of a hassle than I did. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have any questions, post it in the YouTube comments, and I'll respond. And if people are interested in some other stuff, I'll, for instance, like all the steps I had to go through to make that GCC bootstrap, which was non-trivial, happy to do another video. Just send me some comments requesting stuff. To shut down the virtual machine image properly, go into the Debian Sparc virtualized environment and type shutdown --h now from your root shell prompt, and that's to make sure that the disk image doesn't get corrupted or anything like that. I also highly recommend making a backup of that QCOW file every once in a while so you don't lose any work in case something does go wrong.